We continue with our focus on the crisis in the DRC. We're joined by Parliament's Malusi Gigaba. He's co-chair of the Joint Standing Committee on Defence. Now, the Joint Standing Committee on Defence earlier called for an investigation on the deaths of the 9 soldiers to prevent further deaths. They're also demanding answers on the preparedness of the SANDF. Good evening, Mr. Gigaba. Thank you very much for joining us on the program. Now, you issued a statement on Sunday. This was, of course, following the announcement of the death of the 9 gallant soldiers. The number of fallen soldiers has since increased. It's now 13. And the reality is the situation remains as dangerous and as volatile as it was over the weekend. Your reaction, firstly, as Parliament's Committee on Defence.
Good evening. And we must first convey our condolences to the families of the deceased, particularly to also their comrades in arms on the ground who are in a very, very volatile situation, as you correctly stated. We have been gravely concerned as the committee about the news that are coming out of the DRC. And we have written to the minister. I spoke to her this morning, requesting an urgent meeting of the Joint Standing Committee, probably jointly with the Portfolio Committee on Defence and Military Veterans, so that we can understand what the situation is on the ground, understand the type of support that our soldiers have been receiving, but also understand what measures are being taken, because it's quite evident that this is a very comprehensive, it's a very complex situation. It doesn't involve only the rebels and the government of the DRC. It also involves neighboring countries, particularly Rwanda, Uganda, and others. So we need to understand what is being done in order to resolve this situation. We do not believe that our soldiers should be the front line of peacekeeping, but they should be there to support the political efforts to bring about long-lasting peace, because the problems in the DRC have been ongoing for long.
That has become the debate now, actually, as to what exactly is the role of this mission, the SADC mission. The ANC in its briefing a bit earlier today added to this discourse that element of the role of a peacekeeping mission, saying there must be a distinction between a peacekeeping mission and a grouping on an offensive or engaged in serious combat. He says you cannot take sophisticated weaponry in this instance if you are a peacekeeping mission. But there's a debate as to whether our role purely is that of peacekeeping. But let's move with the assertion that it is a peacekeeping mission. Granted, there are principles of peacekeeping, which among others are the non-use of force except in self-defense. But surely you would have to have brought in that sophisticated weaponry to counter the rebels, just in case you find yourself in a situation where you would need to defend yourself. So does such a reasoning to say if you are a peacekeeping mission, you must limit your arsenal?
You know, it is the rationale, but the situation in the Eastern DRC is that you are facing, as I said earlier, a complex situation which involves other countries which are arming the rebels. They will obviously be hostile towards the peacekeeping forces, both from the side of the United Nations as well as from the side of SADC. So we need, in that instance, first to have a political effort, a concerted political effort to resolve that conflict, engaging the rebels, the government, and the neighboring countries that are being implicated in the conflict. So our soldiers have to be there in order to support that effort. But all of that notwithstanding, given the hostility of the rebels and the countries that are implicated, we need to ensure that our soldiers, from an intelligence and equipment point of view, are very well equipped in order to be able to fend off any attack which may be directed to them. And this is what seems to have been the problem, caught in the crossfire between two forces, and yet we did not seem to have enough equipment to defend ourselves and push back. So
meaning that argument then wouldn't stand. The fact that if one seeks to belabor the point that we are on a peacekeeping mission, we do not need that sophisticated weaponry at the level of the weapons that M23 is utilizing. You're saying that if you have assessed the terrain, you have to go in with that sophisticated weaponry to match theirs. And this is purely for self-defense, again, still observing the principles of what exactly a peacekeeping mission comes in to do.
I think based on the grave conditions on the ground as we have experienced in the last few days, it's quite clear that we are not very well equipped and prepared for what ordinarily would have been a peacekeeping mission. Because at a general level, yes, when you go to a peacekeeping mission, you don't bring sophisticated weaponry. But the intelligence should have informed us, and experience now does indicate that we are facing a situation which has caused anxiety, not only among our soldiers in the front line, but also among South Africans. And therefore, we need to respond in a manner that is going to uplift the morale of the men and women we have sent to the front line, but that is also going to bring confidence to South Africans that their children have not been sent on a danger zone where we are not prepared to bring them back home alive.
Especially, Mr. Gigaba, because the UN makes provision for such. But I want to shift our focus now to the call for perhaps the return to diplomatic means and resumption of peace talks. Many say this escalation in hostilities speaks of diplomatic failures. What needs to happen at this point?
At this point, you know, the problem in the Eastern DRC has been ongoing for long, and there are multifarious opinions about what exactly is the problem. Are neighboring countries defending their national security, their territorial integrity, or there are other issues of national interest which spill over to the Eastern DRC's mineral resources that have also come into the fray? All of those issues speak to the urgency to engage in a diplomatic effort, a concerted diplomatic effort. And South Africa has got enormous experience in that regard. We've got many diplomats that have been involved in peacekeeping negotiations all over the African continent and elsewhere in the world who need to be engaged through the United Nations, SADC, and the African Union to bring about long-lasting peace in the Eastern DRC. The soldiers, as we say, as the committee, must not be the first line of diplomatic efforts, but they must go there to support the diplomatic efforts to bring about long-lasting peace, because South Africa can't perpetually and for all eternity have a peacekeeping mission based in the DRC. At some point, the government of the DRC has got to engage with all its neighbors. They must enter into compromises and agreements, and the government of the DRC must extend its governance over all of the DRC, the Eastern Congo included.
All right, Mr. Gigaba, thank you very much for your time this evening. That's Malusi Gigaba. He's co-chair of the Joint Standing Committee on Defence and Parliament.